Hi, I'm your host, Brenda Close.
And I'm your co-host, Kaili Smalley.
And this is our podcast, Treasuring Education. Welcome back to our Empowering Parents series. Today, we're exploring the world of curriculum, where we'll begin by discussing what curriculum is. Then we're going to talk about how standards fit in with that, and we'll end our conversation by explaining how standards-based grading works. So, Kaili, let's start with a real clear definition of curriculum.
Okay, so the simplest definition of curriculum is the standards and content of all that students learn in school in every subject.
Okay. However, be aware that curriculum has different meanings to different people. Pretty generally, curriculum, like you said, is just everything that students learn. But it has so many components. Consider all these. You have goals, content, instructional methods, assessments, resources and materials, pacing guides, a scope and sequence, and then the personalization or differentiation options. It's a lot.
That is true. There's actually an entire professional field dedicated to developing curriculum. And these specialized educators, they actually build, design, and package textbooks, and then all the extras that go with it.
Right. So when you hear that your school is considering a new curriculum, it's a lot more than just buying new textbooks to replace those old worn-out copies. There's a lot to think about.
There is so much to consider. So let's talk about it from a distance, just to kind of see how it all works together.
Okay. All right. So before curriculum writers even begin, they take a look at the state standards. Each state has the freedom to set their own standards of learning. It used to be that states had very different standards from each other because our Constitution says that each state is responsible for its citizens' education. But then in 2010, the Common Core State Standards movement began. And states around the nation are now much more aligned to one another. Could you kind of give us a little overview here of how Common Core came to be?
Sure. So the Common Core State Standards were developed as a set of educational standards, and they were really designed to provide consistent learning goals for students across different states in the United States. And they were, like you said, released in 2010 in specifically math and English. Mm-hmm. And the true aim of that was to ensure that all students, regardless of their location, regardless of what state they lived in, received a high-quality education that specifically prepares them for college and career success.
That's right. Developed through the collaboration of educators, other experts, stakeholders from various states. The goal was to create just a clear roadmap for what students should know and be able to do at every grade level. They focused on critical thinking, problem solving, and the real-world application of knowledge.
It is important to note that education, as we all know, is dynamic, and the landscape is constantly evolving. So while the Common Core standards were widely adopted, 41 states adopted them, some have now chosen to replace or modify them completely with their own state-specific standards.
That's so true. Education isn't a one-size-fits-all, and states have the flexibility to tailor their standards to meet the unique needs of their students and communities. As parents, it's essential to stay informed about the standards in your state and how they align with your child's education.
That's right, Brenda. And stay connected with your child's school and teachers to really understand the specific curriculum being used. We need to engage in open conversations and seek clarity about learning goals, those expectations, and how you can support your child's academic progress.
Excellent advice. By maintaining those open lines of communication with the school, you can ensure that you're well informed and that you're actively involved in your child's educational journey.
So, Brenda, what exactly is a standard?
Okay, so think about a standard as if it were a unit of measurement, like a yard, a foot, an inch. The curriculum is like the lumber, so pieces of wood, right? And think of a test as a measuring stick or a tape measure. When you build a house or any project, you can trust that a 6-foot piece of lumber is going to be 6 foot whether you're in Idaho or Rhode Island or Texas. Again, the educational standard is the unit itself, like the foot or the yard.
Okay, so far so good. It makes sense.
Okay, and the curriculum is what is being compared to the lumber in this analogy. So curriculum equals lumber. The student learning is like that house at the end that's being built.
Okay, so let me make sure I'm following. So the house is the outcome we want. So it's compared to what the child learns in school.
Yeah, because that's the outcome.
Okay. And then the curriculum, like the lumber in the house, is what's being measured. So then the measuring tape is what builders use to measure the lumber. Like the standards are what teachers use to measure the materials used in teaching and eventually what the students learn. Is that right?
That's absolutely right.
Okay.
That's right.
Yay. Okay. So can you give me an example to kind of help me think this through a little more?
Yeah. All right, so let's look at the standard. Here's an educational standard from the kindergarten Common Core in math. It says, correctly name shapes regardless of their orientations or overall size.
Okay, great example. So being able to name shapes is the yard, foot, or inch, and it's the standard for all students. Mm-hmm. And then the curriculum should give a way for the teacher to teach shapes. So it would probably include definitions, practice, and tests, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So when standards measure curriculum, it's either it meets the standard or it doesn't. It's either up to par or it's not. Now, take it from measuring the curriculum to measuring the student learning. This is like moving from just measuring the lumber to actually measuring the square footage in a house.
Okay, so the test uses the measuring tape, but is now measuring learning. And after some learning, teachers measure the child's skill with that test.
Yes. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, good. So if the standard here about shapes is like 1 foot, the child who can name the shapes, regardless of the shape's orientation or overall size, will measure 1 foot, or 12 inches. The child who can name most of the shapes may measure 6, 8, 10 inches. It's a lot like a very specific grading scale when you're measuring student learning.
Okay, that makes sense.
And although talking about curriculum and standards can be complex, if you remember that analogy of construction with the measuring tape being the test and the unit of measure being the standard, then I think it's going to be a little more simple.
Yeah, I would agree. It already makes way more sense to me. Okay. So let's shift gears once more. So another important aspect of curriculum is the implementation of standards-based grading. And I know that some schools are using this form of grading to completely replace the traditional percentage grades. Like when I was in school, we had 90 to 100% equals an A, etc. And then standards-based grading really focuses on evaluating and reporting student progress based on the learning standards.
Right. It's very different than the traditional scale. With standards-based grading, the emphasis is on understanding and demonstrating proficiency in a subject matter. Students are assessed on their ability to meet very specific learning targets and show their understanding of the concepts that were covered in class.
Exactly. So standard-based grading provides more detailed feedback to students and parents about their strengths and those areas for growth in relation to the learning standard. So it really promotes a growth mindset that we talked about in an earlier podcast, and it encourages students to take ownership of their own academic progress.
Very well said. Reports show specifically what's taught and what's learned, and where students can show growth. Those report cards. It can be incredibly detailed. This is very different than seeing an 83% on a report card. That number doesn't tell you a whole lot. Do we know, did the child just learn everything at 83% proficiency? Or has he just missed turning in a few homework assignments?
Oh, okay.
If your school is using the standards-based grading system, it's very important to be familiar with the learning standards and grading criteria used by your child's school. They've probably seen a lot of communication come from school and from teachers on the new standards-based grading program. This gives us that measuring tape. so that we know how to support learning at home and engage in those meaningful conversations with both our children and the teachers about their progress.
Absolutely, Brenda. And by aligning our expectations with the learning standards and supporting your children's growth, we can help them thrive academically. So remember that standards-based grading is designed to provide a clearer picture of your child's progress and guide their educational journey.
So true. Understanding both the curriculum, standards, and the grading approach can empower parents to be active participants in their child's education. Remember that when you hear the term standards, educators are talking about the measuring units of education. The standards don't usually include specific content or curriculum that's taught in the classroom.
So each state gives educators the units of measure, or the standards, and then the curriculum provides the material, including the tests or the measuring tape, and then teachers teach and measure student learning in standards, like measuring a house in square feet.
I think you got it.
Okay. So one more question. There was a big controversy when some states dropped the standards for handwriting. Mm-hmm. And it's become a bit of a joke that there's a large group of people who don't know how to read or write cursive. Is this because of the standards?
Great question. So some states did drop the handwriting standard mostly because of the large number of standards in other areas. There's just so many of them. So many standards. Just because a state doesn't provide a standard, like a handwriting standard, does not mean that the topic isn't being taught. It just means that the state isn't providing the measure for that learning or requiring that it be taught. It's really up to the local school. It also means that it's probably not being tested on a state test.
Okay, that makes more sense. I remember asking some of my own students if they were still learning handwriting. I asked a couple of second graders last year, and they guaranteed me that they knew how to read my cursive. So I was a little relieved because I think it's an important skill.
I agree.
But okay, that makes more sense. Thank you.
Good. Well, I hope that paints a much clearer picture. Thank you for joining us today. We're here to support you every step of the way. Check out our video on standards to learn more and to really get a deeper understanding of what we're talking about here.
And join us in our next episode as we discuss the #1 learning strategy that you can use right away. Until next time.
Follow us on your favorite podcast platform to get notifications of our next podcasts. And sign up for our newsletter at www.treasuringeducation.com.